Hello, I'm Mikey Campling and welcome to this special NaNoWriMo 2016 edition of the Writing Talk podcast. So after a quick whistle-stop tour through my bits of news, we will crack on with the main topic, which will take up probably the rest of the show, which is all about NaNoWriMo, getting stuck into it and tackling it this year. Welcome to the Writing Talk podcast, a show that helps you to build your skills as we go on our writing journey together. Okay, so I can't say what I've been doing this week because actually I've had a massive gap in recording this podcast. So I feel like I owe an apology to all those kind souls who kind of picked up on the podcast from its outset. Sorry, there's been a massive gap. And really, it's just been pressure of time and trying to get things done and trying to get things produced. And it does take me quite a while to put the podcast together. So hopefully, just by sort of crashing into this and just doing it, it's again one of those things which I've said before, it's never going to be a convenient time. So I just had to pick up the microphone and start again. So here we are. And what have I been doing in the massive intervening period? I've had to do a lot of work on my email system because I started picking up a lot more email subscribers to my newsletter on my website at mikeycampling.com. And really the system I was using, which was called MailPoet, wasn't really fitting my needs. I was using the free version of a WordPress plugin and I needed to go to something a bit more professional. So I've gone on to MailerLite, which seems to be working really well for me. That could be a topic for another episode, I think. I'll perhaps go into that for you. I finished off the trilogy that I've been working on for some years, really. It took me a long time because it was my first book was a Darkening Stone book called Trespass. And I finally got through, and after putting out a longer middle book called Outcast, finally got the third one out, which was called Scatterston Pit. And that trilogy's out there now. And I will... It was great to get that finally finished and be moving on with other projects. It's always good to get stuff out. That's what I've been kind of focusing on. And I'm going to put together an omnibus at some point because there's a novella which goes with that, which is really just for my subscribers at the moment. So that has been a big chunk of my time, those two things, my newsletters and my producing actually stuff and putting it out, getting that trilogy finished. And I've been sort of stuck right into the next book in the cheat code type series, which is probably going to be called something like the Download, which is spelled differently, the LODE, Download book. So in fact, it'd probably be L0DE, knowing me, because there's a zero in cheat code instead of the O. So I might try and keep that going, but we'll see. We'll see if that's going to go into a series. I definitely wanted to make the next book, and I'm getting quite a way through that. And I'm actually logging some of that towards my NaNoWriMo goals. So I'll come back onto that in a second when we dive into the main topic. Okay, the main topic of NaNoWriMo, or the National Novel Writing Month, which happens in November. One of those things that's been going on for years. I've often sort of toyed with the idea of joining in, and often sometimes I've signed up and then I've had to weigh it up, and there've been other things happening, like I've had a load of editing to do or something. And again, this philosophy of it's never going to be a right time to do it. Sometimes you just got to jump in. So I realised that some of my other friends, writers that I communicate with on Facebook, were telling me that they were actually continuing with their project. So it wasn't really disrupting their work, but they were logging that up as part of their progress. And I don't think it matters, actually. If you do that, that doesn't feel like cheating or anything. You're producing words every day. You're giving yourself a goal. You're giving yourself an extra little target. And I thought, well, actually, I could do that. So I am joining in this year. So far, so good. And I thought it might be a good time to go through a few of the things that kind of help to keep me going in writing, and perhaps they'll help you if you're tackling NaNoWriMo, or even if you're not. I hope this podcast will be useful if you're just, tackling a draft of some novel or other and wanting to find ways through it, which I think we all are all the time. I've probably said this before, but there's really, no kind of magic formula where it suddenly gets all easy and you can just sort of knock things out. But not for me anyway. I think unless you're deliberately churning out something which full well isn't, wonderful quality, but just happens to sell, that's fine. But that's kind of a different thing to what I try and do. I don't think I'd be comfortable being a sort of pulp fiction type machine. I can understand that that's a very legitimate thing for people to do. I don't think it would suit me. I'm not sure whether that would suit you or not, but there we go. Horses for courses, I think. Okay, so that's kind of the way I'm approaching this. I had a sequel to my book Cheat Code, which is probably called The Trust. It doesn't seem the best title in the world, but it's what I'm going with at the moment. And although I was partway through it, I wanted to dive in, and it's nice because, I've got friends who are doing it. We can share word counts, and it kind of feels like an accountability partner, which is always useful. If you're on there on NaNoWriMo and you want to add me as a buddy, my username on there, I tend to use my real name for pretty much everything. It's Mikey Campling as one little block. That's my username. I don't know how I've ended up with a hyphen in, but I have somehow. So if you can find me and work out how to add me as a buddy or whatever, that's absolutely fine. We can contact each other that way if you like. That is absolutely fine with me. How much time I'll have to actually spend on the NaNoWriMo.org website remains to be seen. But if I can help people in some way, that's fine. So yeah, it's that accountability thing which is good. So if you're sitting on the fence, you might want to think about diving in and going for it anyway, because one of the things that's odd about NaNoWriMo is this idea that they use this name of winning, and I kind of wish they wouldn't. You say, have I won NaNoWriMo? And the idea that there's only one possible outcome and everything else is bad or wrong or a failure in some way, I don't particularly like that. I mean, if you start and you write like crazy for a week and then you have a week where you can't write for some reason, perhaps you're on a holiday or you've got a lot of work on or something, or family commitment, or somebody's ill or something, I don't think you've lost NaNoWriMo because you can't make up the time, I think the only way you can not win in this game is if you give up and you never pick up your pen again and you never start tapping away again. That's the only way to define failure, I think, in this game, is if you stop writing. If you keep going, then that's fine. If it takes you, an extra couple of days to finish, or an extra week, or an extra month, or an extra year, it doesn't matter if you finish the thing, just keep plugging away. So that's one of the things that I think is maybe we could try and push to one side. The idea of winning and losing, I don't think it's helpful. It's the idea of accountability is great. The idea of having writing buddies and writing groups and, using the forums and things, sharing your word counts, if it encourages each other, I think that's absolutely fantastic. But I don't think it's particularly a game of winners and losers. The other thing as well, is just to bear in mind, yes, National Novel Writing Month, but if you kind of want to take a bit of tension out of the situation and a bit of pressure off yourself, then don't go around saying you're writing a novel. Yeah, that's going to be the end product. But in a month, what you're trying to do is write a draft. And if you, at least in the privacy of your own, your own home, or your own sort of secretive writing boudoir, or whatever you have, if you can say to yourself, yeah, I'm producing a draft, and that's the reality of it. I'm not kind of splitting hairs here, because that is what you're doing. You're producing a first draft. And it takes the pressure off a bit, because your first draft can be absolutely awful. It really doesn't matter. It could even be quite a good thing. The only thing is you need to have a first draft done. You can't edit it and rewrite it and improve it if you haven't got it. So, take the pressure off a bit. Allow yourself that freedom just to write a draft. And remember, it's a draft. If it was an artist, if you're an artist doing this, you'd call it your first sketch. It's your first attempt to get through a story. And that's all it is. Don't build it up into some tremendous, precious thing. You're not writing the great American novel. You're not suddenly becoming Dickens or something. It's a first draft, and maybe it's your first one. If it is, welcome very much to the game. I hope you enjoy it. So having established that what we're working on is a draft here, what's kind of the scale of the work? What are we trying to do? So you're trying to produce a 50,000 word draft, and that's fairly short in terms of novels as novels go. We find kind of that's a minimum, but that's fine, because as you rewrite things later, if you revisit it, you probably find yourself adding on another 20,000 just in your rewrites. Each chapter gets a bit longer, and it adds up. You'll be surprised how it can suddenly add up as you realise you're rushing, and you've maybe kind of not explained something, some interaction is missing, and a chunk of dialogue that you need to put in can easily add several hundred words to a manuscript. And if you multiply that up to each chapter, you find it can soon get to a reasonable length. However, let's deal with the 50,000 word part of it. So what are you looking at? If you were able to write every single day in November, you're looking at roughly 1,700 words. I know it's a little bit lower than that, but just rough and ready is fine for our purposes here. That's a fair chunk to put in if you're not used to producing that much. Certainly when I started writing, I would have found that very difficult. So it is challenging, and you will have to go fairly quickly. But I'm going to actually push you up a bit, because I think it's a good idea to aim for roughly 2,000 words in a day if you possibly can, because things will happen. There'll be days when you don't write. But, let's just bear in mind what I said at the beginning, that there's always that caveat that if you don't hit the 50k, it really doesn't matter. That's your goal, but, you feel free to extend it, and you may have to set it aside, whatever. It's there as a nice target, a bit of encouragement, but don't let it become a discouragement. It's there insofar as you allow it to be there. If you don't want that target, forget about it. Just do your own thing. But roughly what we're looking at is about 2,000 a day. If you want to make up for those days and when you're not going to be able to write, and you still want to feel like you've hit that target, which was a voluntary target. Remember, you signed up for it. Nobody made you do it. So, do it if you want to, if you're enjoying it, if it helps, if it's encouraging. And if you can, and I'm going to explain this a bit more in a second, if you can, try and write every day. But what do we mean by that? Because that doesn't necessarily mean sitting down every single day for a couple of hours and, churning out your draft. I know it might sound like that. I know a lot of people might have that in their mind as that is exactly what they've got to do. And sure, if you've got that time and that headspace and that freedom to do it, then that's a great way of doing it. But lots of people don't have that time or that space to take that many hours out of their day every single day for a whole month. So again, let's take some of the pressure off. Let's take some of the tension out of it a bit, because when we talk about writing, there's actually several different processes in writing, and let's just separate out the bit that we're calling drafting. Okay, that's when you're actually committing words to a page. You're typing them, you're writing them on a bit of paper or whatever. That's drafting time. So you will need to put in a certain amount of time to drafting. Now, if you can do some drafting every single day, that's great, because that habit, that familiarity, it builds up your speed. It helps you to get momentum, which is great in following through for the whole month and finishing, and generally nice in writing. If you can develop a sense of momentum, it's actually very helpful. Now, if on other days you don't have time to do any drafting, that doesn't mean it's a total loss. You think, oh no, my word count is a big fat 0 for the day. I had to go out of town for the day or something. That's what happened to me the other day. I had to go out of town, something I wanted to go and do, a commitment I had. And that was fine in a way, but it does feel bad when you say, oh, 0. But in that day, perhaps you contributed something to your writing effort overall. So, if you're out walking the dogs and you're musing over your plot and you're thinking about, the plot points, you're deciding what's going to happen next, then does that mean you did no writing that day? Of course it doesn't. It's just kind of, you weren't drafting, sure, but you were working on your writing. You were doing a part of the process. You were doing some thinking out. You were doing some planning, perhaps. If you're in the shower and you suddenly realise what's going to happen in the end of your story, or you you suddenly realise some really important point about a character first thing when you wake up in the morning, or last thing at night perhaps. You get an idea and you scribble a note on a piece of paper. You're doing something useful. So don't feel that just because you haven't done as much drafting as you'd like to do in a day, perhaps you have contributed to your writing effort overall. And who knows, if you hadn't had that wonderful thought you just had while you were walking the dog or taking a shower or whatever, hopefully not both at once, if you hadn't had that thought, maybe your novel would have failed. Maybe it would have been hopeless, or you would have been stuck. You would have written yourself into a corner and not being able to finish the thing. So those things are significant, they are important, and they are valuable. So there's not just one thing. There's not just the drafting element. That is part of it, a big part of it, but there's lots of other aspects to it, lots of other processes that come into play. And if you're able to grab a bit of time, and sometimes odd moments, you're waiting for a bus, you're driving to work or something, perhaps you're on a commute in some way, if you can scribble down some notes, that can be incredibly valuable because it can save you lots of time later on as well. If you've jotted down the bullet points of what's roughly going to happen in the next chapter or something, that's absolutely fantastic work, and that's really good. And you can do things like that, like maybe when you're on a train ride or something, a train journey, you can jot down some points, but it's hard to actually focus to do proper drafting often in that kind of situation. Okay, going on to thinking a bit about time. This is quite a deceptive thing, and I'm terrible at this. Most people are not very good at time management, are they? Really, when we get down to it, have to admit it. Most of us don't. We probably suck at it. But one of the things I'd just like to get into your heads as well is that if you can sit down for a 2-hour block in silence or with your music on or however you like it, and you can sit there drafting, bashing out the words, that's fantastic. Lucky you. That's fantastic that you can do that. You're very lucky. Lots of us don't have that freedom, and that doesn't mean that those episodes of time that you do have aren't significant. So I recently had to sit in a waiting room for something, and I was probably there for about half an hour or something, drinking bad coffee out of a plastic cup, the thing we all have to do. And I happened to have had the foresight to take a pad and a pen with me, and I was just sat there and watching the people come and go, and I started scribbling away. Now when I got home and I actually dictated that, but it could be typed up or whatever, there was a good 500 words there, and I was really surprised. And it wasn't even that bad. I had to sort of tweak it a bit, but it wasn't too bad, the stuff. Now if I said to myself, okay, that's wasted time, I can't do anything, I'm going to be on Facebook or reading a magazine or whatever, those words wouldn't have got done. And it's very easy, I think, when you have a short period of time to say to yourself, I've only got 20 minutes, I can't possibly start my writing now. By the time I get into it, the 20 minutes will be up. And so we make an excuse for ourselves and we don't do anything. I've got 20 minutes, all I've really got time to do is go on Twitter and Facebook and things like that. And that's nonsense, isn't it, really? 20 minutes can be very significant time. You can actually draft quite a few words in 20 minutes. And if you know that time is tight, it actually pushes you not to be distracted, and you can really get quite a bit done. I can't remember who now, I'm afraid, but there was one of my friends on Facebook the other day was putting something down saying, they had to, they were waiting to pick up one of their kids from a club or something. They, were doing something. They had to take the cars to the garage and they had to wait for that to be done, and something else like, waiting for a bus. And they had all these things during the day, and they actually added up to sort of, 1,600 words in the day or something, which is kind of what you would need to get through, for NaNoWriMo. And that person hadn't actually sat down at a desk or, in a quiet corner at any point. What they'd done, they'd been forced to, these little enforced waits during the day, and they'd made use to them there. I think one of them was in the car, waiting for something. And we all have those little times, I think, when we're kind of forced to sit and wait and do something. We're kind of put in neutral, aren't we? Well, try and grab those times. Try and grab them and use them. See if you can actually scribble down some words. And these days we've all got lots of devices with us, so perhaps you could be tapping something into a tablet or even a phone, or perhaps you've got a little laptop with you or something. So you could actually do typing, but, a good idea, get a reasonable sized notebook, a kind of A5 or A4 or something like that, that's actually reasonable size rather than a tiny little notebook, I think works better. And and scribble down. I quite like to double space things when I'm doing that. Just use every other line, because when you're scribbling by hand, writing quite fast, you often your kind of hand goes faster than you realise, and you miss bits out. And you can go and use the blank line to insert extra notes and extra words and things like that. When that was the word I was looking for, go back and scribble it in. Because it occurs to you 30 seconds after you finished the sentence, and unlike a word processor, you can't just go back and insert it. So good idea. My tip of the day would be kind of double space when you're drafting by hand. Okay, so we're really trying to think about using those little bits of time. Ask yourself if you can use up those little bits of time during the day. And remember that if you can grab the thinking time outside of your drafting time, that is actually quite good, so that when you sit down to draft, you've already worked through that knotty plot problem whilst you were, having a shower or cooking the dinner or something. It was in the back of your mind. You were thinking, oh yeah, I just realised that's, how the murder weapon gets found or something. If you can do that outside of your drafting time, then as long as you remember it, of course, so you got to jot it down, but as long as you can remember it in some way, then that's great. A good thing for odd ideas can sometimes be using a little, if you've got some kind of app on your phone that records speech, that's quite a good thing to do. There are lots out there. I won't go through a bunch of them now. I mean, things like Evernote can do little sound clips, but your phone might have a native app in there that just records sound as well. So little ideas, just get them down in some way, and then when you're sitting down, you can actually use your drafting time to draft. A lot of people worry about getting stuck with their writing, the idea of writer's block and so on, not knowing what to do. And if you feel under pressure of time, that can be the time when you sit sort of staring at the ceiling and you're not actually getting anything done. Hopefully, what I said earlier, if you can try and remember that, the idea of the fact that it's a draft, it's not the finished thing, probably no one else will ever see your first draft. It's probably just as well if they don't. Just keep it for you. It's your document. If it's awful, that's absolutely fine. That's very much par for the course. Most of us look at first drafts and sort of go through, oh my God, I can't believe I wrote that. Who actually did that? Is English even my first language? You sort of look at these things and sort of, wallow in a bit of self-loathing for a bit, but, try not to fall in that trap for too long. But the draft can be really bad. I can't overstate that. It can be really, really dreadful. It's absolutely fine, because it's a stage to go through, and you won't realise which way your story needs to go sometimes until you've had a go at it and made a hash of it. And only then can you start to develop it further and, add and take away and switch things around to make them work. What else could be really encouraging for NaNoWriMo? Let me see. I do have some wallpapers over on my website. I'm trying to think where they are exactly. I'll put a link in the show notes, but if you go to mikeycampling.com, there is a search box up there somewhere, a little magnifying glass that everybody has these days. If you click on that and do a search for something like NaNoWriMo or Keep Writing Wallpapers, there are a couple there. They've been made a little while now, so I probably ought to make some new ones. If I do make some new ones, I will kind of share them around a bit, and I will perhaps put them on the site for this podcast is, of course, writingtalkpodcast.com, and Writing Talk Podcast is all one word. So if I do come up with any new resources, like a nice new wallpaper or something, desktop wallpaper for your computer screen to help you keep writing, I will put it on that site, because that'll be easy for you to find. Okay, I think I'll leave it there. I think I've taken up enough of your time for the moment. I'll just briefly summarise to just get us into it. So, NaNoWriMo, think of it as writing not so much a novel as writing a draft. Take the pressure off a bit. It can be as awful as necessary to get the job done. Use small blocks of time wherever possible just to get some thinking done. And if you have enough time and space to do it, actually, if it's, say, 15, 20 minutes or more, get your pen out and scribble down some proper sentences, because it's surprising how much of your drafting you can get done. If you are able to block off some longer pieces of time to do some drafting, It's a good idea if you're prepared for that time and that you don't have to spend that, say you've got a nice hour where you can really do some good drafting. If you spend that time scratching your head and trying to think what you're going to write, that's going to waste a lot of that time. So if you've done some of that thinking beforehand, made some notes, made some jots, that's all fantastic, because it will be in the back of your mind, and you probably find you won't even need to refer back to those notes. I make notes and I never look at them again, find them later and think, oh yeah, I forgot about that, because it was kind of in the back of my mind, and it tends to get lost in the flow of the actual writing, but it's in there somewhere. And I think I'll leave you with that thought. As always, particularly for NaNoWriMo, keep writing, keep tapping at the keys, keep scribbling away, and above all, while you're doing it, keep smiling. Thank you very much for listening. Sorry there's been such a huge gap between episodes. I will try and get back into producing them more regularly. If you want to encourage me to do more episodes, then you can subscribe on various methods, every possible method you can subscribe. You can contact me via the website. There's kind of Twitter feeds and things there. If you want to contact me directly, my Twitter is at Mikey Campling. That's Mikey. And that would be great to hear from you. Always great to hear from you via whichever website that you like. It'll get to me and I see it all. I see everything and reply wherever I possibly can. So thanks very much for listening. And until next time, keep writing. Goodbye.